Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week I hopefully finish wiring the Link ECU into the Rockster. Alright guys, welcome back, and those of you who've been following will know that this is the Rockster. This is my 1998 Porsche Boxster with an Audi V8 swap, and I have been working through putting the Link ECU into the car. So it's going to be full standalone engine management because I fried my laptop trying to flash the factory ECU, and the Link is going to give me heaps of headroom for moving forward and future upgrades to the car. So where we're at, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up and see what we got up to. But last time we've wired the ECU to the main systems of the car. So I'll just list off. The main systems are injectors, coils, throttle position and electronic throttle, cam angle sensor, crank angle sensor, temperature and airflow. They're the main systems, and then we've got a few extras, like we've got NOx sensors, which are just handy to have, but not 100% necessary. If you want to actually wire a car in, you can get away without NOx sensors. We've also got wideband oxygen sensors. Again, not necessarily something you have to have, but another nice extra thing to have. And all those things are now connected to the ECU, at least the signal side is, but we've still got to get some power through to all of our coils and get some grounds made out so that basically everything can run as it currently is. Because a lot of these systems have just direct power going to them, they are obviously not currently powered, so we've got to run them through, and that is where I've actually been studying the very difficult to understand Porsche Boxster wiring diagram and getting my head around this factory relay box. So basically I can use a lot of the factory relays and just reutilize those wires to go to these places, so I don't have to put in another relay box. In some ways maybe it could be better to just put a whole new relays in just for what I need, just so I know what's going on, but most of it's there. A lot of this wiring I still want to keep because I'm still going to be running tail lights and just the other stuff on the car that is not engine related. I'm still going to be running. So we're going to try and keep that stuff, try and link in the ECU so that it can send signals to my current dash and things like that as well. So let's get stuck in. So again, I thought I'd go through and do to me, what the simplest things are first, and that would be injectors and coils. There's lots of wires to them. Obviously, there's 8 of each, but the principle is pretty straightforward. For example, the coils generally have a power, a ground, and a signal. The signals are connected, so we need to do the power and the grounds. So I've gone through now, and on the original Boxster loom, you can see that they've got a main power here, which all their powers are black. This black line coming through to a junction, it splits out into about 8 or so individual other black wires, slightly smaller gauge, and then one of them splits down further again. That's the power distribution to all the coils and injectors and everything. So I'm going to utilize this same black wire, just connect it up to my bulkhead connectors, and then I can join and make a similar size style splice on the Audi loom side to run the power to all the bits and pieces. So a lot of these wires here are actually the individual powers for all the individual coils, etc. So we can do the same system as what Porsche already did and join them all together. So let's start finding the wires for this and the wires from this and make them one thing. All right, well, we've got a lot less wires here now, and we're not going to use all the wires. We're not going to connect up all the wires that were originally on the engine. There's lots of little sensors and things that we're not transferring over, that we don't need to get this thing running. But we've got now a bunch of powers and a bunch of grounds that I've gone through and I've spliced and I've soldered to make these sort of joiners, to join them together to get a few through. I've got another Deutsch bulkhead connector here with the much bigger Deutsch pins, the large Deutsch pins. One thing to note for people, if you've got history with Japanese cars, which I did, I started with Japanese cars where everything black is generally the grounds and everything red is the power. On most German cars, brown is your ground. So just something to note and get used to, and generally that gives you a bit of an idea what things do. It's always good to trace and work out what things are doing, but yeah, that's something that's good to know. But we've got all of the powers and all of the grounds connected up now to all of our sensors. I think we are most of the way there. Okay, so I'm getting on top of this now. I've managed to get my grounds together. I've just put some little eyelets on them so they can go onto a grounding point right next to the ECU here. I've also got my power set up through the original relay that powered the factory ECU. So the last couple of bits and pieces I need to do on this is to connect up the outputs from the ECU back into the rest of the car. So for example, I found here the original fuel pump relay wire, so I'm going to connect one of the auxiliary outputs from the ECU to the fuel pump relay. I've also then got to find a speed signal to send back through to the tacho on the dash, and that should be most of it. So I think I've gotten to the end of this mess, and everything I need to connect up, I think, is connected up. So what I'm going to do now, in the mix I've got the old ECU loom and stuff like that. I'm going to trim this all off and get it set up so that I'll label where I've cut it from and keep the wires bunched together. I'm not going to remove them completely at this stage, just because if I do need them, they're here and I can reference back and work out what I've done and where everything's gone. But yeah, if I can start getting rid of some of the excess and just tidying up this mess so it makes a bit more sense, I think that will help me out greatly. So it's tidying time. All right, that is looking much better. That is a manageable mess. Obviously, these fittings will go through the bulkhead over here at a later stage. Yes, I did mess up with these bulkhead fittings, and I put them around the wrong way because there's sort of one way it's bolted into a firewall and the other way unclips, and I've got the unclip side on this side, so to take the engine out, I'd have to unscrew it from, like, unclip it and then unbolt it from the firewall and take it out. It's not a huge deal, but it would be way easier if it was the other way around. You could just unclip, and then leave the loom with the engine. But that's all good. Yeah, and I've got everything else sort of laid out here. Everything sort of separated out, sort of reasonably close to the way it is. I'll put this stuff all away later once I've established it all works, and then I can actually wrap the whole loom and everything. But the basic structure here is a lot more organised, a lot more ready to go, which is what I wanted. So now I think we can move on to the starter motor. And before I raise the car in the air, I'll just show you, this is the positive terminal block off of the top of the Boxster engine. And so the positive power comes in from the battery there, and then it's sort of bridged here. I think that might even be a fuse. That then runs down and separates out to the alternator and the starter motor. So we're going to go down, we're going to get the car up in the air now and check out what we need to do to connect up these ends, which are currently loose in the engine bay and very oily from the Rockster. All right, so those cables are right up here. They're not long enough to get down to where we need them, because obviously the alternator's down the bottom here and the starter motor is in here. They're relatively simple to connect up because the alternator has basically only one major cable going to it. That's the positive straight from the battery goes to there on the alternator. This small wire is not ultra necessary. Basically that just goes to your charge light on the dash to tell you if you're not charging properly. I don't actually need to try and find that at the moment because that's less of an issue. The Link ECU will tell me the battery voltage and stuff like that as we're driving. So up here on the starter motor, we've got the wire here to the starter solenoid, and we just got a positive cable also coming from the battery up here. And to connect all that power up, I went over to the Audi rec and I pulled this power cable out of the car. So I've got plenty of cables the right length to use. So I'm going to cut this apart and have some power cables connect up to the alternator and the starter motor. So these cables are currently too long, which is not a bad thing because it's much better to have longer cables than shorter ones, but that means I need to shorten them and put new ends on it. And thankfully I have this really cool new tool, which is a hydraulic crimper and a box of heavy duty crimp ends, so I should be able to make my own cables pretty smoothly and easily, I hope. I've never used it before, so let's give it a go. Start cutting this up and see if we can make some cool cables. All right, so you can see I made a couple more cables up here. I've mounted this just with a cable tie at the moment. And that is my power coming in from the battery, and then I've got my alternator and starter motor on both linked in together, going down, new cables going down to the alternator and starter motor, which I'll tidy up a bit later once I make sure everything works. Last thing is, I think I need to work out where the grounding strap is on this engine, and then we should be pretty much there. Okay, so I took the original ground cable off of the Boxster engine. That's the original grounding point there, and bolted it over through to this point here on the engine, which is a lifting point, so nice solid ground. So we have the engine ground. I think that is all of the wiring done. All right, I am very happy. That was a lot of work doing all of the wiring, getting everything connected, but I think I have done everything properly. But before we confirm that, I'm just going to check it. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to disconnect my ECU so that I don't risk blowing that if I've done something silly and wired something up wrongly. The last thing I want to do is kill the ECU, so I'm going to disconnect it now and then go through and just do some tests and test to see if I've got power where I think I've got power, I've got ground where I think I've got ground, nothing fries, nothing goes silly, and then we may be able to connect the ECU up, but not until everything is nice and safe. Battery's on. That's a good start. I just went around and felt all the wires, can't feel anything hot, there's no smoke coming out of anywhere. That's a good start. Now let's connect up the power probe and we'll go around and do some tests. So far so good. Now I'm going to turn the key on and see where we go from there. All right, well, that needs some further investigating because for some reason the relays aren't working properly. For those of you who haven't seen this, this is vital if you're doing any electrical work on your car. I love this thing. Basically, it's a power probe. You connect up the positive and negative on your battery, and it tells you it does the job of like a multimeter and a bunch of other things all in one simple unit. Basically, you stick the end of this into any terminal, and it will it'll give you two different tones of beeps and light up green if it comes up with a ground, and it'll light up red and tell you how many volts if you hit power. But also, if you press the button up, it will send 12 volts out of the end, or if you press it down, it will actually send ground to a circuit as well. So you can energize circuits with it, and fantastic, well worthwhile. I'll put a link in the description. It's yeah, not sponsored, but this is such a good tool. I really use it every time I do any wiring. That said, I'm not getting power. I don't know why. I've got to do a little bit further investigating, but there doesn't seem to be any power coming from the ignition to the back to energize my looms, whether my wiring is not correct or what, but yeah, it doesn't seem like anything is changing when I turn the reds on back here in this unit. No, none of the wires coming in are actually doing anything, so a bit more investigation, but essentially everything to the ECU is wired, bar ignition power. That's a relatively simple thing that I can sort out. That said, there still is the issue of the accelerator pedal. That is something, because it's an E-throttle, I'm going to have to actually mount the accelerator pedal, so that is a bigger job. It's 6 wires that are relatively straightforward. That I'm not too worried about. So to finish this off, we've got that. We've got radiator pipes to redo, and that is a lot of it. I think then we can actually start looking at putting some fluids in and starting it and seeing if we can actually get it running at least. But that is all the time I have for this week. I know this is sort of slow and tedious. Hopefully some of you got something out of this week. And I'll see you next time on another episode of The Rockster. But until then, make sure if you need parts for any of your Porsches, make sure you compare prices at PorschePartsByJeff.com first. All right, guys, see you later.